Hey, what is going on, guys? So when it comes down to it, this channel is kind of all about building your resources, right? I mean, we have videos about building your cognitive abilities so you have the resources to take on tests and do challenging work. We have videos on improving your health so you have more energy on a daily basis. And we have videos talking about a lot of tools that can help you be more productive and get a lot more work done. But one of the resources we haven't talked a lot about on this channel is your money, which is kind of weird because I actually spent the last 3.5 years co-hosting a personal finance podcast on the side, and I am not too proud to admit that I have spent many a Saturday night in the past staring at a financial spreadsheet.
Does this look dull to you?
So now that I have lost all of my friends, I've got time to break down 7 really common financial mistakes that you're gonna wanna make sure you avoid if you wanna start building a solid financial base. Cue the llamas. So our first common financial mistake here is failing to plan for medium-term expenses. And by this I mean expenses that are more than a month out, but still coming up in the sort of near future. Now, if you're like most people, you are probably very well aware of the fact that you have to pay rent at the end of the month, and you have many other typical monthly expenses. You have to buy groceries every single week, and tomorrow you need to go out as soon as possible and buy the Tim and Eric's Christmas Special DVD. You know this. But what you might not be as aware of is the fact that maybe 3 months down the line, you've got to buy textbooks for your next semester, or that a holiday is coming up and you have to buy gifts. A lot of people don't think about these medium-term expenses, and that can get them into trouble. So this is why it's important to frequently look ahead and ask yourself the question, what is coming up in my life? I think of this as a mindfulness practice. Think about all of your life's dependencies and what you're going to need to do in the medium-term future to make sure that they are all going to continue to run smoothly and that you're prepared for any expenses that they might bring. Mistake number 2 is making big financial decisions in your life without running a what-if analysis. This basically means you take the data that applies to your current financial life and then you ask, what if? And you ask it using data. You ask, what would happen if I, say, bought a new car or got a new job or took a pay cut at my current job because I maybe want to cut down to part-time hours so I can pursue a passion. A lot of people jump into these big decisions without actually seeing what they are going to do to the numbers that run their financial life. Now, for all my flaws and all the dumb decisions that I make in my life, one thing that I am not is one of these people, because for the past couple of years, I have been developing this very complicated spreadsheet that basically runs my entire financial life and allows me to easily run these what-if analyses. Is it analysis? Analyses. Analyses, yeah. Now what you're gonna see on the screen here probably looks a little bit complicated, and you definitely don't have to build something this crazy, though I am gonna have a publicly available demo version of this spreadsheet in the description down below if you wanna download it and start playing with it. But essentially, I've built this spreadsheet so that I can put in all of my income sources and all of my typical monthly expenses. And then over on the left side, I've got cells that add everything up, do subtractions, do division, addition, all those other math things, and tell me essentially how much money is left over at the end of the month, how much I'm investing, how much I'm spending on housing, and all sorts of other useful things. Now, to be honest, I have gotten pretty nerdy with this. I even have a second page in this spreadsheet that has accurate federal tax brackets and state tax brackets so I can see what I'm going to be paying in taxes given the amount of income I bring in during the year. And the best part of this is that I can, if I want to make a change in my life, simulate that change before I actually make it in reality. So whenever you are contemplating a big financial change in your own life, I would implore you to run a what-if analysis like this. Build a spreadsheet, or at least know in your head how much you roughly make on a monthly basis and how much you roughly spend on a monthly basis. And then do the simulation in your head or on paper so you know it's gonna happen before it actually happens and you don't get yourself into hot water. Big mistake number 3, and this can be a potentially very big mistake, is not having an emergency fund. A lot of people out there are so gung-ho about paying off their debt quickly or investing money in the stock market or other risky investments that they don't take the time to actually build a base of cash that they can use if something goes wrong. So to give you a little bit of insight on my personal finance philosophy, I feel like your number 1 goal when trying to establish a financial base is ensuring that you can take a punch. What's a punch? Well, a punch is when someone balls up their fist and they connect those bones and tissue and skin with your face and then you get a bruise. But in metaphorical terms, a punch is really anything that sort of requires you to pay a bunch of money that you weren't expecting in order to continue living your life the way that you want to live it. And to make things really simple, the way that you ensure you're able to take a punch is by establishing an emergency fund, having a base of cash that you can tap into if you need it. Now, a lot of people have asked me, how much do you actually need to have in an emergency fund? How much do you need to have saved up in your checking or savings account before you can start accelerating debt payments or investing? And while I can't give you exact numbers here because there are huge cost of living differences all around the world and many other variables to work with, I do have a couple of ballpark numbers that I think are good rules of thumb to start with. So goal number one in my mind would be to establish an emergency fund of $500. Now, to be clear, this is just a ballpark number that I think is a useful figure to start with, but it may be different if you live somewhere in the world that has a very different cost of living index than, say, the average cost of living here in the United States. So if you want to find out what a good equivalent number might be for where you live, you can actually go over to a site called numbeo.com and run a cost of living comparison between two cities. For example, here I have run a comparison between Des Moines, Iowa, which is my hometown, and Prague. And as you can see, it costs 1.3 times as much to live in Des Moines, Iowa as it would to live in Prague. Now, these are definitely averaged numbers based on aggregate data, so there are going to be variations in real life, but this is a good planning tool. Anyway, goal number two, after you have established that $500 emergency fund, is to figure out your number. What is your number? Well, your number is your minimum monthly expenses. So this means cutting out Netflix, cutting out Spotify, cutting out all the chocolate you buy at the grocery store. Yes, this is projection. And figuring out how much do you need to basically maintain a minimum standard of living where you are actually living. So not getting kicked out of your apartment or anything, but buying rice and beans, living in your apartment, and all that stuff. So maybe you look at your bank statement and you find out that last month you spent $1,200 on all of your expenses. And then you look through all the expenses, you cut out the ones that seem not essential, and you get down to a number of $800. So $800 a month is your minimum monthly threshold. Goal number two is to build up that amount of cash in your checking account at all times, which means after all monthly expenses are taken care of, that amount of cash should be left over in your bank account. You should never go below it. And finally, goal number three is simply the combination of goal number one and goal number two. Have a $500 emergency account somewhere, maybe a savings account, and then have your minimum monthly expense as a cushion in your main checking account. Only then should you start accelerating debt payments, and by accelerating, I mean going beyond the monthly minimums or investing in maybe riskier investments like the stock market, mutual funds, whatever it may be.
Be connected!
All right, mistake number 4 is carrying a credit card balance. Now, I have had a credit card for about 9 years now, and I use it every single day, but I do not view my credit card as credit. I don't view it as borrowing money. I view my credit card as simply an intermediary step between my bank account, the money that I know I have, and the purchases I want to make. This means that while I do use my credit card for most everyday purchases, I make sure that I go in every single month and I pay off the balance in full. And as a failsafe, I also have an auto payment set up, so I know it's always going to be paid. Now, the reason that this is so important is that credit cards are in general a very bad tool for borrowing money. I don't think that the concept of debt itself is inherently evil, but the way that credit cards do it can get you into trouble really fast, because credit cards often have a 20% interest rate or higher, and if you start building up a balance, the compound interest from that high interest rate can start to get you into a position where you can never dig your way out, because the interest is accumulating faster than you can pay it down. So please raise your hand and swear to me that if you're going to use a credit card, and I think that you should, always pay your balance off at the end of the month, never carry one, and never pay a dime of interest to the credit card company. Now, our 5th mistake here is kind of the opposite side of the coin from our last mistake, and it is refusing to build credit at all. Some people out there are just so fearful of debt that they refuse to use credit cards outright. They refuse to take on any debt whatsoever. They hate debt. But this can be a destructive mindset. Think about this philosophically for a second. There's this saying that goes, "No man is an island," and it is more true today than it ever has been in the past. To achieve almost any of your big goals today requires participation in society, and that participation usually involves interactions between strangers. And like this or not, one of the primary ways that our society uses to gauge the trustworthiness of strangers is to use their credit history. Can you borrow money and be trusted to pay it back? And And many of the basic things in life use this as a trust indicator, whether it be something as big as getting a mortgage for a house or something as relatively simple as getting approved for an apartment lease. I actually know people who have applied to live in apartments and they have had more than enough money in their bank account to pay for 6 months or even a year's worth of rent, but have been rejected because they did not have an adequate credit history. So as soon as you can, start looking for ways to intelligently build up credit. When I was 18 years old, I did this by getting a credit card with a $500 limit, and just as I do now, I went in every single month and paid the balance off in full. And honestly, if you do this, you don't even have to use it for every single transaction. You don't even have to carry it with you on a day-to-day basis and deal with the temptation to use it. You could lock it in a drawer and just set it to pay something like your Netflix or Spotify bill. All right, mistake number 6 is failing to invest your money or waiting far too long to do so. Albert Einstein once may or may not have said that the most powerful force in the universe is compound interest. It's kind of one of those quotes that has a less than trustworthy sourcing, but it is true. Compound interest can work wonders for you if you get in on it early enough. So to answer 2 questions related to investing, first and foremost, where do you invest? This is one of the areas where people get tripped up because there are so many choices out there and they just simply don't know where to start, so they get analysis paralysis. Now, I am not a registered financial advisor by any means, and I don't want to be the kind of person who's telling you where to put your money, so I will just tell you what I have done myself. When I was a junior in college, I started an account with Vanguard, and I started investing a small monthly amount with them every single month, and then later I complemented that with an account over at betterment.com. And aside from those resources, there are many other places to invest your money out there. There are places like Fidelity, there are places like probably your local credit union or bank, but the one thing that I'm going to point out here is that you want to avoid high fees in whatever investment you choose. Anything more than 1% is probably just a reason to avoid that investment. Beyond that, there are great books out there like I Will Teach You to Be Rich, where you can learn more, and we actually did an entire episode on investing on our podcast, so I'll have that in the description below. And there are also websites out there like Bogleheads, which give really solid and I think sane investing advice, so those might be good places to check out. And that brings us to our second question that I get asked quite a bit because I'm in the college and student space, and that is, should I pay off all my student loans as fast as I possibly can, or should I pay the minimums and use all my excess cash to start investing early? Now, this is a nuanced question. I should probably make an entire video on it, but I'm going to give you my abridged thoughts here. First and foremost, the answer to this question is going to be very dependent on how tolerant of holding debt you are. If you're one of those people who is very emotionally affected by having debt, then you should probably pay that off as quickly as possible. That being said, if you are more tolerant of holding a little bit of debt, then we can start to get a little bit nerdier about this. So an investment is going to have a certain rate of return, right? And your debt is going to have a certain interest rate. So if the rate of return on an investment is higher than the interest rate on your debt, then putting money towards that investment is going to make you a little bit more money in the long run than if you were to put more money towards the debt and not invest at all. There's a spread between those two numbers, and that's where you can make more money. But the problem is that the rate of return on any investment out there is uncertain. That is the nature of investing. You have to take on some risk to get reward. So because of that, you have to be slightly risk tolerant to use this strategy. Now, if you invest in something like an index fund, which is just a simple investment that follows the stock market, and you look at the historical returns of an investment like that over the long term, then you get a rate of return around 7%. And there's a great blog post that I'll link in the description down below if you want to see the data behind that. Now, you might be thinking 7% sounds great, and my student loans are at 4%, so it's clearly a good decision, right? The one thing you have to keep in mind here is that 7% figure is a long-term figure. Sometimes the market may be way up and may return like 20%, and some years, like 2008, you get a negative return. You could lose a bunch of money. So we're talking about long-term returns here, and you have to be risk tolerant. And for that reason, I think that it is a good idea to have a little bit of a cushion between that 7% figure and your interest rate on your debt. So here is my rule of thumb. For those of you who are a little bit risk tolerant and want to maximize your returns as much as you possibly can, I say to pay off any debt that has a 5% or higher interest rate as fast as possible. Don't invest until you do this. Of course, get your emergency fund, but don't invest in the stock market. But for any debt that is below 5%, just pay the minimums on that debt and take all the extra money you have at the end of the month and put that into a responsible investment like an index fund. All right, we have arrived at our final money mistake, which is a bit more of a meta mistake than some of the other ones on this list, but I think it is still important. And the mistake is focusing on immediate financial ROI, as in return on investment, in all of your decisions. What I mean by this is a lot of people out there are focused on the money far too often. They chase the money and they turn down opportunities that could result in a lot of potential personal growth, career growth, relationship growth, because it doesn't come with a paycheck right now. So once you have established that financial base, and this is important, once you are able to take a punch, start thinking a little bit more long term. Start investing in yourself. Don't chase money for too long and let your personal development stagnate. And on a related note, and I have to mention this here, make sure that the investments that you make in yourself aren't only the result of spending money. And what I mean by that is make sure that you are investing time and effort into your development as well as money, because a lot of people out there think that just by buying productivity books or buying gym equipment, they are going to magically become stronger or more productive or smarter. And that isn't the case. When it comes to professional development, there are really 3 different steps to any kind of improvement. There is the purchasing of new tools, which is the most fun part, the most novel part, and the part that gives you the biggest rush when you do it. But then there's also the learning stage and the practice stage. And both of these stages are harder, they're not as fun as going out and buying something, but ultimately they're more rewarding and more important. Now, earlier in the video, we made a point about looking ahead and making sure that all of your life's dependencies are covered. And one area where people often fail to do this is in their digital life, especially when it comes to their security. I cannot tell you how many times I've met a friend who is using the same exact password for their bank as they are for their Final Fantasy VII fanfiction forum login. And that is a big problem. When you repeat passwords, you open yourself up to a lot of vulnerabilities and the potential of getting hacked and maybe even having your money stolen. So going forward, make sure that you are always using strong, unique passwords for every single online account that you have. And an easy way to do this and keep it all managed and organized is by using a tool like Dashlane. Dashlane is a really well-designed password manager that can easily generate strong, unique passwords for all of your online accounts. And it can also auto-fill those password and login forms so you can easily get into the websites that you use every single day. And what's even better, especially for me, it can automatically fill in any other form online as well. And this saves a ton of time and eliminates a lot of friction in your everyday life. Dashlane can also store things beyond just passwords. They can store secure notes for you and your payment information so you can pay for things online really quickly, and all of your information is stored in a patented security architecture that has incredibly strong encryption. So if you want to start improving your online security in a very easy and convenient way, then head on over to dashlane.com/collegeinfogeek to give them a try for free today. And if you want to save a little bit of money on their premium subscription, which lets you sync passwords across all of your devices and securely share passwords with trusted friends and family members, then you can also use the promo code collegeinfogeek at checkout to get 10% off your order. I want to give a big thanks to Dashlane for sponsoring this episode and being a supporter of our show. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, definitely hit that like button. And if you don't want to miss out on future videos that come out every single week, then click right there to subscribe to this channel. You can also click right there to get a free copy of my book on how to earn better grades, or click right here to get one more video on this channel. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video.